I think that Iran's leaders, if I were in their shoes, I would absolutely be concluding that a nuclear bomb is the only means for long-term deterrence. Although I would also have to consider in my mind that the pursuit of a bomb, if detected, could mark the end of the regime this time. So I would be weighing up those factors very, very carefully indeed. But there will absolutely be constituencies within the Iranian regime, particularly what we might call the Iranian deep state, the Revolutionary Guards, the intelligence establishment, the Supreme Leader's office, who will be saying to Khamenei, you must now authorize what you refused to authorize for 20 years and lift the fatwa on nuclear weapons. And that's the path we must go down.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on The Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. On Tuesday, Donald Trump persuaded Israel and Iran to accept a ceasefire, and so far it seems to be holding. But has Benjamin Netanyahu achieved his two war goals of removing the nuclear threat from Iran as well as the ballistic missile threat? Or could he be wrong on both counts? And now, after the fighting has stopped, where does the Ayatollah regime stand? And how do Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump emerge from the 12-day war? Those are the key issues I shall discuss with the defense editor of The Economist, Shashank Joshi. Shashank Joshi, let me start by asking, how fragile is the ceasefire? Is there a danger that the war could reignite? Or after 2 days of holding, are those fears diminishing?
I think the ceasefire is reasonably robust because Israel believes it has secured most of its war aims. Iran feels as though it needs the pause in fighting. And I think most importantly of all, we can see that Donald Trump very clearly identifies with this ceasefire himself and therefore is going to impose it to the maximum degree possible onto the Israeli side. However, I think that the big question, which we may get onto on the question of nuclear damage assessment, is whether Iran has surviving stockpiles of what we call highly enriched uranium, HEU, which is near weapons grade uranium, as we discussed last time I spoke to you about a week ago. And if those stockpiles have survived, and if Iran attempts to move those stockpiles to a clandestine location, and if that's detected, I think there is a very good chance Israel will feel a compulsion to strike again, regardless of whether it is deemed to be breaking the ceasefire or not. But absent that scenario, I think we are likely to see a broad a sense of stability for a little while to come.
Let's then come to the big question you talk about. On Tuesday, when he accepted the ceasefire, Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that Israel had secured its goal of removing the Iranian nuclear threat. My question is, how confident are you, as defense editor of The Economist, of that claim? America's Defense Intelligence Agency says Iran's program has only been set back by a few months. But thereafter, the CIA has said it's severely damaged. So there seem to be contradictory voices coming out from America. What do you believe is the truth?
There are. I think we have a period of real uncertainty. We have to acknowledge there almost certainly has been severe damage. If you drop 14 massive ordnance penetrators on a site, even one that is buried, you are going to cause some damage, especially if your centrifuges, which are the machines that spin uranium gas to separate out the different isotopes you might need for a weapon, if those are spinning at the time, as I think I discussed with you last time, they stand a good chance of being disrupted and damaged permanently. However, the big uncertainty is, first of all, if although the known nuclear sites may be put out of use and their contents may be damaged, A, does Iran have a surviving stockpile of highly enriched uranium? This was previously thought to be located in tunnels under the complex at Esfahan, which was bombed by both Israel and America. But there is conflicting information as to whether that stockpile was effectively destroyed. Some Israeli claims suggest that it was damaged, or at least buried under rubble at some of these sites. But the storage site at Isfahan does not necessarily appear to have been destroyed. And we do not know if Iran moved those stockpiles prior to the strikes. So that is one vital question, because current Iran had about 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to 60%, which, if enriched further to 90%, is probably enough for about 10 bombs. None of the claims I have seen, whether from Israel or from America, fundamentally answer that question just yet. And comments by J.D. Vance, the vice president, suggest the stockpile may be loose. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, says it does not know where those stocks are right now. So its own inspectors are unable to confirm this.
According to Reuters, Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, speaking in the company of the Austrian government, has said that he believes that the enriched uranium has been relocated and does survive. He says that, in fact, just before the Israeli strikes began, the Iranians informed him that they were relocating things, and he assumes that what they would have relocated is the uranium. In that event, doesn't it mean Iran retains the potential of making a nuclear bomb, even if it takes longer than would have been the case before the American strikes?
If that's the case, absolutely. I would put some caution on the statements of the IAEA because it does not have its own means of gathering intelligence beyond commercial satellite images. It relies upon intelligence from the member states of the agency. And so it is somewhat dependent on others to make those difficult judgments. Israel, with drones flying over Isfahan constantly, would have had a better sense of if anything was moved. But you're right, Karen. If it was moved, that brings us on to the second point. These facilities may be damaged, but did Iran have a stockpile of secret centrifuges at any other sites? Did it have the ability to rebuild new centrifuges, or have its centrifuge components been put permanently beyond use? And we know that the facility at Esfahan, which is a conversion facility for taking uranium that is enriched and turning it into a metallic form that is suitable for the core of a bomb, that was damaged and probably destroyed, but we do not know if Iran has alternative facilities, secret conversion facilities, and how long it would take to rebuild those underground. None of those questions are fundamentally answered by either the DIA report, the Defense Intelligence Agency report, which I must emphasize is low confidence, which in American intelligence parlance means it's very uncertain, it's very preliminary, and that's not answered by the CIA or the Tulsi Gabbard Director of National Intelligence claims. They don't fundamentally tell us whether Iran had secret sites, alternative components, alternative centrifuges that would allow it to take a stock of highly enriched uranium, enrich it to 90%, turn it into metallic form for a bomb, and proceed. I think that all of those steps would be exceptionally difficult for Iran to do under current conditions of scrutiny, in which it knows it may be bombed again if it attempts these things and is detected. However, we also know Iran is a big country, and over many years, I don't think months, I think longer than years, it could reconstitute that kind of program in secret. And of course, North Korea in the 1990s and the 2000s surprised America by building a covert enrichment plant without America's knowledge. So it is not beyond the wit of Iran to do this. The challenge would be acquiring the components it needs, if it doesn't have them, from international supply chains that will be deeply penetrated by Western intelligence agencies.
There are reports, Shashank Joshi, that Iran has built a third secret location, sometimes referred to as pickaxe, in a mountainside which is not officially declared to the IAEA. How do you respond to those reports? Because if they are true, that could be one place where this stuff has been moved.
It could be. So Pickaxe, just for clarity, is a site that is underground that is thought to be extremely deep and large, given our analysis of the excavated material that we've been able to observe on satellite images. And it is extremely close to Natanz. It's very close to Natanz. It's a few minutes away, I believe. It does not look to me, from the images I have seen and the experts I have spoken to, that that site was bombed. The only assurance we have is Israeli officials suggesting that they would have observed the movement of uranium and they did not see that, that they feel confident, they know where the uranium is, and that some of it was put out of action. However, intelligence agencies, even very good ones, get things wrong. They get things wrong, and Israel may not have continuous surveillance custody of all of these sites, not least now that the operation is winding down. Israeli drones may be able to fly fewer patrols over some of these sites. Iran may be resurrecting some of its air defenses that may have been suppressed and keeping their heads down during this campaign. So I think we should be humble about our ability to confidently say Iran does not have a secret site and that Iran does not have any uranium. And Karan, that ultimately is my major concern, that this operation is successful in setting Iran back, but it doubles down on its political will to seek nuclear weapons, which was only partial prior to these strikes, and that it does so without IAEA inspectors. So the next big step, the next big question is, will Iran allow the inspectors back in, or will it abide by a parliamentary resolution in Iran to suspend cooperation with the IAEA? And if it does that, I think we will be in a fresh crisis very, very soon indeed.
What's your hunch? Because the Speaker of Parliament in Iran is determined that the resolution passed by Parliament will be adhered to. I know that the Supreme National Council has to still approve of it, but if it is adhered to, it means inspections, particularly rigorous inspections by the IAEA, will be ruled out, as well as, I believe, CCTV coverage.
Yeah, all kinds of things. So continuous camera feeds of nuclear sites, inspectors on the ground able to conduct snap inspections to gather evidence of soil samples, for instance, to identify how much material is located where, numbers of centrifuges and their production rates, also things like seals. The IAEA has particular tamper-proof seals that it places on nuclear material. All of that would go if Iran were to suspend cooperation. But I have to say, Iran's parliament says a lot of things. It doesn't do all of them. And Iran's government has a careful balancing act to follow. If it completely walks away from the IAEA, if it withdraws from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it risks encouraging European states to impose a measure known as snapback, which is the automatic reimposition of UN sanctions on Iran. Iran would likely wish to avoid that. And if it walks away from the IAEA and it becomes clear that it is pursuing nuclear weapons in secret, that also risks causing further Israeli or American strikes, including perhaps those against the regime that is severely weakened at the end of this contest. And so I think Iran will be walking a fine line between limiting its cooperation with the agency, slow walking that cooperation, but without necessarily blowing it up altogether. It is a pragmatic state that understands what it needs to do to survive, and I don't think it's ready to completely walk away, especially when Trump seems to be in a conciliatory mood, as I heard myself yesterday at the NATO summit at The Hague in the Netherlands. I heard him say he doesn't think further strikes are necessary. He thinks he'd like to have further nuclear talks with Iran. I think Iranian nuclear leaders Iran's leaders will be attempting to work with him on some of this to some degree.
Let me put it differently. Could this war have convinced hardliners in the Iranian regime that a nuclear weapon is the only credible way of protecting themselves? And in an
If I
attempt to redouble their efforts to make the bomb, do you think they might go in for a dirty bomb Presumably, with 60% enriched uranium, if it survives, they could attempt to make one. How likely or unlikely are both those? The determination to make a bomb and then the choice of a dirty bomb.
In respectively likely and unlikely. I think that Iran's leaders, if I were in their shoes, I would absolutely be concluding that a nuclear bomb is the only means for long-term deterrence. Although I would also have to consider in my mind that the pursuit of a bomb, if detected, could mark the end of the regime this time. So I would be weighing up those factors very, very carefully indeed. But there will absolutely be constituencies within the Iranian regime, particularly what we might call the Iranian deep state, the Revolutionary Guards, the intelligence establishment, the Supreme Leader's office, who will be saying to Khamenei, you must now authorize what you refused to authorize for 20 years and lift the fatwa on nuclear weapons. And that's the path we must go down. I think that is what happened, by the way. In 1981, Israel bombed the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. What did Saddam Hussein do? Did he give up on nuclear weapons? No. He rebuilt his program underground beyond the visibility of inspections, and he accelerated that program, which was detected only when inspectors went back into the country after the first Gulf War in 1991. And I think that is a real possibility today, with Iranian leaders deciding that's the only means of security. But a dirty bomb, I think, is relatively unlikely. Just for the clarity of your viewers, a dirty bomb, it does not involve a nuclear chain reaction. It is not a process of nuclear fission by which neutrons set off a chain reaction in the core of a bomb, causing a very large amount of explosive yield, marked by tens of kilotons. It is a bomb in which radiological material is intermixed with conventional explosives, causing contamination over a large area, but none of the traditional blast and fireball and radiation effects in the way that we associate with a fission bomb of the kind dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, let alone a thermonuclear bomb. I think it is fundamentally unlikely. Why do I think that? Because the deterrent effect is much lower. The level of damage that can be caused is not existential in the same way. Certainly not to Israel, certainly not to America. But above all, it is very difficult to deliver a dirty bomb to the target. Many people talk about putting it on a shipping container, on a ship, putting it into Haifa, putting it into an American port. That is much, much more difficult than it sounds. After 9/11, when dirty bombs were a major American preoccupation, as you may recall, Karen, then the Americans invested huge amounts in detection methods for radiological material at ports of entry, ships, airports, so on and so forth. So that's very hard to deliver to a target, and it's very hard to calibrate, to use in the way that you would want it to be used. Because let's not forget, Iran does not have a death wish. It does not, I do not believe it wishes to simply deliver a nuclear bomb to Israel out of the blue. It views this as a deterrent mechanism, that if it is attacked, it has a means of response. And that means it has to have a means of triggering a bomb at a time and place of its choosing, not just in a random, haphazard way. And with a dirty bomb, that is exceptionally difficult to do.
Let me put you a potential paradox. Trump has made it clear, most recently of all in the Netherlands at the NATO summit, that Iran will never have a nuclear bomb. I think he said it in so many words. But Iran's secret knowledge or upfront knowledge of a bomb can't be bombed out of existence. The country may have suffered a serious setback, and it may not be able to make a bomb for years, but the knowledge is homegrown and surely it will always be there. And each time Iran hereafter attempts to make a bomb, whether that happens in 2 years or 10, America will have to bomb Iran again and again.
Yeah, well, Karen, the Israelis have spoken about this as mowing the grass, mowing the lawn, which is a rather macabre phrasing for what is effectively a perpetual campaign to suppress the nuclear ambitions, constant warfare. But Israel is comfortable with that idea. It recognizes that that may simply be the necessary thing. On know-how, you're absolutely right. I spoke to a Western intelligence official just the other day who said Israel has killed maybe 14, 15 nuclear scientists, very senior ones, very important ones, but there are hundreds of nuclear scientists with the physics knowledge necessary to do this, which, as you know, is not, a space age technology. It's technology that has been around since the 1940s and is available to a large number of countries. The only caveat I would put on that, Karen, is that it's not just about know-how. You need, for instance, you need the means of testing implosion. How does an implosion occur at the pressures that turn solids into liquids so they behave like liquids? You need hydrodynamic facilities for testing. You need metallic conversion facilities. You need centrifuge components that have very high tolerances that may only be available from particular European suppliers. And those supply chains will be monitored like hawks by Israeli and Western intelligence agencies now. So if you are an Iranian state agency trying to buy just the type of, centrifuge bolting stability pad, let's say, you need, and that is available from a Swiss company, you are going to have a very tough time buying that in an undetected fashion. This is not the days of AQ Khan wandering around bazaar selling this stuff. The nuclear non-proliferation international arms market has changed. And so that, I warn, could really constrain Iran's ambitions into the future still.
Now, Shashank Joshi, yesterday, Netanyahu also claimed that Israel has achieved its second war goal of removing the ballistic missile threat. Do you accept that? I asked because minutes before the ceasefire came into effect, Iran fired ballistic missiles which killed 4 Israelis in Beersheba. And the BBC is now saying that Iran's missiles are kept in silos, placed in tunnels under mountains, and could have escaped destruction. So is Netanyahu correct when he says we've achieved our second war goal of removing the ballistic missile threat from Iran?
I think he can claim great success, Karan. No one can destroy all missile launchers, which, as you point out, are kept underground, load the missiles. They only pop out for firing. But he destroyed, I think, well over half of Iran's stockpile of launchers, maybe 2/3. It forced Iran to launch from the eastern part of the country, which meant their range was reduced because their payload was reduced because they needed longer range. So I think Iran's missile forces are severely set back. To rebuild them, I think will take a long time. However, Iran may believe it has a long time. And so once again, we may need to see a recurrent Israeli campaign of constant strikes.
Now, after the setbacks it suffered during this 12-day war, how secure, how stable do you believe is the Ayatollah regime? And I suppose in particular, how long do you see Ayatollah Khamenei continuing? There have always been rumbling of discontent within Iran, sometimes even within the regime itself. Could that now come to the fore?
I think we're going to see an outpouring of concern about why a regime spent 30 years pouring money and resources into underground facilities in a nuclear program that's been set back by years, probably, whilst people struggled with an escalating cost of living. And we had already been seeing rising anger against the regime. You have a generation of military leaders that's been lost. I think you have a regime that has been somewhat humiliated with the loss of its proxy network across the region. I think that you will see a reckoning. However, let's not forget, Iran is an autocratic regime. They have been hanging people in the last few days accused of spying for Israel. I think you will see significant repression in the days ahead, a clampdown. And so, like as with many of these regimes, I think it will survive for a while, but that brittleness will continue to grow, and the likelihood of a sharp reckoning down the line is now quite elevated.
Now, when Hamas attacked...
And Karen, I'm terribly sorry. I'm afraid I must conclude at this stage to run for another appointment. I'm so sorry.
I understand fully. Thank you very much for joining us, Shashank, and thank you very much for your understanding of what Netanyahu has achieved and where, in fact, the obstacles still lie. I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, And if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.